Ho-Oh, a Pokemon of legend. One of the first few Pokemon that Ash sees in the anime, but always felt like a secondary legendary thanks to the movie Pokemon 2000. But more importantly, it always felt like there were a lot of steps involved to get to it, while Lugia is just in a cave, possibly even stumbling upon it by accident while exploring. But how well will Ho-Oh do at beating Pokemon Crystal all by itself? Let's find out. The rules will be in the description if you're curious. One quick question before we get started. Do you prefer Lugia or Ho-Oh? And why? We start off the game by grabbing our level 5 Ho-Oh and naming it Flames. From here, Professor Elm then gives us his phone number and then gives us the direction to his friend Mr. Pokemon's house. And after a quick meet and greet with Mr. Pokemon, Professor Elm then tells us we need to come back. On our way back, we then get interrupted by this red-haired fellow. He challenges us to a Pokemon battle, but he really has no idea what's in store for him. With a Ho-Oh, it's really not going to be much of a challenge to take down even a Totodile. It takes only 2 Sacred Fires before it eventually goes down and gets us the win. We leave him completely baffled, and we start working our way towards Professor Elm. There appears to be an officer in the laboratory, and he says the second Pokemon's been taken. We give him the name of the perpetrator, triple question mark, and then Professor Elm gives us some advice, and then tells us to go on our way towards Violet City. While in Violet City, we then decide to stop by the gym. But I wasn't really worried whatsoever, as I had 2 Sacred Fires, and he has 2 Pokemon. I figured there was a bit of a chance that Pidgeotto would survive, but I figured a struggle would eventually hit him. It's not like Mudslap could have taken me down that quickly. As the prize for defeating him, he gives us the TM for Mudslap, which we gladly take and then immediately teach because the 5 PP for Sacred Fire just isn't enough, especially for the Bellsprout Tower. In the Bellsprout Tower, we eventually find the rival, causing a ruckus. He eventually does leave, but we then have to battle the Elder, who then eventually gives us Flash. On our way towards the Union Cave, I then pick up the Paralyzed Cure Berry, followed by then battling a Bellsprout and catching it for Cut and Flash. While in Union Cave, I then pick up the Swift TM and then immediately teach it, so that way we have even more PP, plus a pretty decent move. After arriving in Azalea Town, we then meet up with this old man named Kurt. He lets us know about the rockets that are causing problems in Slowpoke Well. We then defeat all of those rockets and make our way back, where he then hands us a Lure Ball. From here, there's nowhere else really to go except for Bugsy. This battle's one that I'm not really worried about in the slightest. In fact, I even go into this battle poisoned because it didn't bother to pick up even a Poison Cure Berry. However, it doesn't really take long before we can then take out his entire team using Sacred Fire. Nothing can withstand even 1 Sacred Fire, which makes sense because he's just the Bug-type trainer. He then hands us our badge and we make our way on towards the rival, who happens to be blocking Ilex Forest. He's gained a few new additions to his team since last time, as now he has a Ghastly, but Ghastly can't really stand up to a Sacred Fire. However, Croconaw can. Luckily, our special defense is just so incredibly high that even a water gun really doesn't manage to do a whole lot of damage, so we can take down Croconaw and move on to Zubat, who is like a Zubat, so of course it goes down in 1 Sacred Fire. While in the Ilex Forest, we then manage to return the Farfetch and gain the Cut TM, and then immediately teach it to our Bellsprout. However, we do have a different strategy here. We're not going to go to the end of Ilex Forest like usual. We're actually going to head right back into Azalea Town, where we're going to go ahead and pick up the Charcoal from the guy we just got the Cut TM from. Charcoal is a really useful held item because it improves our fire damage by 10%, so our Sacred Fire can be even more powerful than it was before. After a quick trip through the Ilex Forest, we then make our Goldenrod errands, which include picking up the coin case, getting a haircut, getting an Abra from the Goldenrod Casino, getting the radio card so we have it in the postgame, getting our flyer, Kenya, talking to the flower shop girl in front of Sudowoodo, and lastly, heading up to Whitney. However, Whitney is not really going to be much of a problem since we have a legendary beast on our side. We almost one-shot the Clefairy, but thanks to the burn, we take it out. Then, for Miltank, we use a Sacred Fire that manages to burn on its first try. It's just too bad that Miltank got to go first, otherwise that burn would have reduced her damage by 50%. Whitney becomes hysterical at the fact that she lost, so she throws a fit before then giving us the badge. We then make our way to the Flower Girl, who says to go to her sister. Her sister then gives us the Squirt Bottle. We use the Squirt Bottle on the moving tree. It turns out to be a Sudowoodo. We don't really want a Sudowoodo, so we run away. While battling the Kimono girls, I then learn Gust, which I obviously teach over Safeguard. Then I make my way to the Burn Tower, where we run into the rival while searching for the legendaries. The legendaries are apparently not there according to the rival, but we know better, as we then take down the Haunter with a Sacred Flame. Still, with no good move for Croconaw, we then go with Swift. However, Swift does not seem to be doing very much damage, as Water Gun seems to be doing just as little amount of damage as it was before, thanks to our high special defense. We move on to Sacred Fire for Magnemite, which obviously KOs it, and then for Zubat we use another Sacred Fire, and it can't withstand the flames, as we then get the victory. However, our victory is short-lived, as we then fall through the floor, allowing us to take a glance at all the legendary dogs before they run away. With almost everything complete in Ekritique, we then make our way towards Morty, the gym leader. There aren't a whole lot of good moves to use on ghost types. However, Sacred Fire is just so powerful we're able to take out Ghastly, followed by Haunter, in one single hit, moving on to Gengar. However, Gengar does not outspeed, and we take it down with a critical hit Sacred Fire. And last but not least is Haunter, which is also taken down with a single Sacred Fire. With that victory, we then get the Shadow Ball TM, which we'll definitely be saving for later, taking us to Olivine City, where we run into this sailor who says we're not strong enough to move boulders, and because he's a nice guy, he's gonna give us the HM for strength. After a quick visit to the mart, we then talk to this old guy who gives us the Good Rod. We then immediately use that Good Rod to fish in the sea south of Olivine City. Our first catch is actually a Krabby, which is exactly what we wanted. It's good for cut, surf, strength, and whirlpool. We're then easily able to catch it on the first try thanks to the lure ball that Kurt gave us. We then head over to the Olivine Lighthouse, where on the top floor we can grab a rare candy. On the second to top floor, Jasmine then tells us about the sick Ampharos. However, thanks to my own stupidity, I forgot to talk to the man who gives you the surf HM, so I had to backtrack to go get that. Once in Cianwood City, we're then able to talk to this guy, who then manages to give us the secret potion. But before we leave the city, we need to battle the gym leader in Cianwood City, Chuck. Now, unfortunately for Chuck, his matchups are not very good, as we're able to take Primate Buff with the Secret Fire. However, then we switch over to Gust for Poliwrath because it's part fighting type, so Gust is a flying move, and therefore super effective against fighting types. Unlike the last run, we are not going to be using Dynamic Punch this run. On our way out, we talk to Chuck's wife, who then gives us the Fly HM. We then use this HM to go over to Ekritique City. From there, we can head over east to Mahogany, then northwest towards the Lake of Rage, where we pick up the rare candy. After defeating the Red Gyarados, we can then talk to Lance, who gives us a mission to do with the Rockets. But the Rocket section is very boring, they're all very low leveled, and very easy to deal with. So we're going to go ahead and skip ahead to the part where we take down all the Electrodes and Lance gives us the TM for Whirlpool. With that completed, the door to the Mahogany City Gym is now open and we can take on Pryce. Pryce is a senile old man who just lives by himself and doesn't really get a lot of practice battling, because despite being the 7th gym leader, the dude really does not do very well in these battles. In fact, his Pokemon are such a low level that really anybody at this point could really beat him. Fire moves aren't particularly even that good against his gym, but we managed to suffice very well. I would say that someday maybe he'll consider practicing, but he's probably too old and too in his ways. We then head back to Olivine, where we head to the lighthouse and then give Jasmine the secret potion. It turns out to work, and when she heads back to our gym, where she finally takes our battle. For once, I actually expect to one-shot sweep her entire team, because we have Sacred Fire, and that's a fire move. Her Pokemon are Steel type, and therefore weak to fire moves. Even though Ho-Oh is not exactly the fastest, it is still certainly faster than both Magnemite and Steelix, so we get ourselves the easy win with just 3 moves. That, we only have one more gym left, but before then we have to do a lot of extra things. We pick up Return from the Goldenrod department store, we head south of Goldenrod to pick up the rare candy, north of Violet City to pick up the other rare candy, and northwest of Violet City to pick up the PP up. I would like to skip a lot of the Rockets storyline, however something bad happens in this battle. The imposter director then starts off with a Coughing. In order to save PP, I then use Gust, which does not manage to take down Coughing, and it managed to get a smoke screen off. This smoke screen is going to cause the beginning of the end, because now my moves are going to start missing. But, unfortunately, we then get poisoned off of a sludge attack. So even though we have tremendous defense, decent HP, and recover, we're now on a clock. Weezing then lands 2 very strong sludge attacks in a row. So I do the smart thing, and I use recover. Unfortunately, because of the poison damage, it puts me in damage range for him to use an explosion. The next attempt, I go into this battle at the exact same problem. I have a smokescreen and I'm poisoned once again at the Weezing. However, this time I'm not an idiot, and I remember that I actually have Swift Attack, which means I'm going to be able to get some accurate hits off. So it's really just a matter of time and hoping that it doesn't use an explosion. Swift is actually quite the game changer in this battle, because now I actually have consistent damage. So I just need to make sure to use recover at the right time and then use swift, so that way I get through this battle relatively easily the second time. However, it was very scary there for a moment. With that, we get a victory over the imposter director, and we get to move on because he gives us the basement key. After getting that reset against the imposter director, I then decide that we need to upgrade our moveset. Both Swift and Gust have outlived their usefulness, and we managed to upgrade with Shadow Ball and Return. We continue on with the Rocket plotline, and then somehow meet our rival in the basement. Our rival has been quite a bit upgraded since the last time we saw him. He evolved his Zubat into a Golbat, but unfortunately it's still not strong enough to survive a Sacred Fire. Still don't have a good move against Feraligatr, but unfortunately for him, Feraligatr has not upgraded any of its movesets since the last time we saw it. It still has Water Gun. Magnemite is obviously going to be taken down with a Sacred Fire because it's still very weak to fire types. With the addition of Shadow Ball on our moveset, we now have a move that can actually take care of Haunter, leaving us to Sneasel. But Sneasel is also very weak to fire types because it's part ice type. That takes down the rival, and we're going to go ahead and skip ahead to the end of the rocket section here, where we've defeated all the rockets in the radio tower and we get the clear bell from the director. We can then head down one floor and pick up the pink bow off of Mary. With all of the rockets finally completed and all of our gyms except for one completed, we can then head over to the final gym, Blackthorn City. But before then, we have to go through the ice cave, where we can then pick up the waterfall HM. With the hopes of getting our last badge in hand, we then head over to Clair and try and get our final victory. I expected Clair to be one of the most difficult battles in the run because we don't have a super effective move against our Pokemon, but however, after seeing the first Dragonair, we were able to take it down with one return. Armed with that kind of knowledge, we were able to take down the next two Dragonairs with one hit each. Kingdra, however, could be a big issue because it has a high damage surf attack. Luckily, Return was within a 2-hit damage range, so we were able to get the win. However, we were able to have to choose between getting rid of Fire Blast or not, and of course, Fire Blast is not nearly as good as Sacred Fire. After Clair's sudden defeat, we then had to head over to the Dragon Den, where we talked to these old guys, and then after answering a bunch of questions, we were able to talk to Clair. Clair then gives us the badge. However, we do have to walk right back into the Dragon's Den, as the old guys will give me a Dratini if I answer the questions correctly, and I certainly did. Dratini is able to learn the last HM move, Waterfall. After leaving the Dragon's Den, we then get a call from Professor Elm. He wants us to return back to the lab. We return back to the lab and he gives us the Master Ball. Says we can head to the Indigo Plateau. On our way to Victory Row, we then pass by this rare candy. After a very brief visit to the Victory Row, we then come across the rival as we're exiting the cave. The rival thinks he's perfected his team and wants to battle us. He's added one more Pokemon and about 10 levels apiece. However, that's just not going to be good enough as we take down a Sneasel with a Sacred Fire. Feraligatr we still don't have a good move for, but yet Feraligatr still only has Water Gun, so it's taken down quite easily. Golbat has never been a problem throughout the entire run and still does not continue to be a problem. Then for Magneton, we're going to go ahead and use the Sacred Fire because it's still Steel type, and therefore still weak against fire. Still fresh in our memory from the last time, we were then able to take down the Haunter with his Shadow Ball, followed by the new member of his team, Kadabra. But we still have Shadow Ball, so therefore it goes down in one hit just like Haunter did, and therefore proving that the rival is not very strong even though he thinks he is. After preparing by buying a few full restores, we then head over to Will, the Psychic type Elite Four member. Now, unfortunately for him, Will is actually going to be very easy because we have Shadow Ball, and in this generation, Shadow Ball is actually a physical move, and curiously enough, Ho is actually a physical attacker. If you take a look at the bars on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that the attack bar is actually further than the special attack bar. You would think it would be the opposite because most legendaries are very good special attackers. However, Ho is not, and that's very surprising, especially since it's a fire type. Meanwhile, during that entire description time, we were able to take down Will. Surprisingly, we were even able to one-shot sweep the Slowbro, allowing us to move on to Koga. Koga's team has definitely been upgraded, but his brain power has not been upgraded, as I take down Ariados with a return. And I mean this because Muck then uses Minimize, so Koga's back to those accuracy tactics once again. For Crobat, I then use a Sacred Fire. It does almost enough to take it down, but he uses a double team. Of course he does. It's double team. After using a full restore, things could get hairy here. However, I did get 2 returns right in a row, as we then get Fortress, but unfortunately I missed my first Sacred Fire. But the second Sacred Fire hits, and Fortress isn't really any sort of problem. Venomoth is then taken down with a return, and that takes care of Koga. That one could have definitely gone pretty bad. However, everything really worked out for us, as accuracy never really seemed to have been a problem for us. Will Bruno do any better? Bruno Bruno then starts off with Hitmontop, and Hitmontop doesn't really have too many good moves against us as it can only use Pursuit or Quick Attack, so it's taken care of pretty quickly. However, for Onix, we really don't have a good move against it, as our display says Shadow Ball is the best move, and it really is, but it's still not very good. Then taking us to Hitmonchan, whose moves aren't very threatening because its special stat is not very threatening, so one return can take it out because of its low defense. Now, we've been taking quite a bit of damage from Sandstorm, as we almost take down Machamp with a return. However, Machamp knows Rock Slide, and we're taken down by the Sandstorm. On the next attempt, I make it back with just about the same amount of HP, and the thing plays out exactly the same way, except for the Sandstorm decides to subside. After healing on the next turn after Bruno decides to heal, we take another Rock Slide, which does more than half of the amount of damage to us, as I use a Sacred Fire hoping for a burn. Luckily, he just misses the Rock Slide, allowing us to get a return in for the win. It's not necessarily over yet, however Hitmonlee only has fighting moves, and we resist fighting moves, so it really is over, allowing us to get through Hitmonlee and getting through an actually difficult Bruno battle for once. Taking us to Karen, the rival 2 of Gen 2. Karen's team is actually pretty well balanced, as we're then able to use a return on Umbreon. Thanks to a crit, we're actually able to take it down in one hit, followed by using a Shadow Ball on Gengar, which takes that out in one hit, taking us to Murkrow. Murkrow we don't have a good move for, but we use a Sacred Fire and it's good enough, thanks to a really lucky crit. Now we make it to Houndoom, and Houndoom we only have return for, but luckily that's just enough because it has pretty low defenses, taking us to Vileplume. But luckily Vileplume is weak to fire types, and therefore Karen is then defeated, finishing the first 4 members of the Elite Four with relative ease, taking us to the champion, Lance. Gyarados is first and we don't have an electric move, so we just have to rely on return. Unfortunately, we can't take it down in one hit, but it's good enough. But it does set up a Rain Dance, which should lower the damage output of our Sacred Fire, as Dragonite then uses a Thunder Wave to paralyze us, putting us in jeopardy for the rest of the battle, just like Lugia did. But Lugia is more defensively tanky, where Ho is more offensively tanky, so maybe we will be able to get past the Aerodactyl portion of this battle. However, we do have a 4 times weakness to rock moves, so this could be detrimental, as we see how much damage the first Rock Slide does, and it's just absolutely insane as we get flinched. But unlike the Lugia run, I don't have to use my Paralyzed Cure Berry on Jasmine, therefore meaning I have saved it and I can actually swap it in. On the next attempt, we don't have the Pink Bow though for Gyarados, so our return attack's going to do less damage. Luckily, it's not that much less, and we can take it down in 2 hits, only allowing it to set up a Rain Dance once again. Then for Dragonite, it looks like even without the Pink Bow, it's still going to be a 2-shot, which is perfect, allowing us to move on to the second Dragonite. However, without the Paralyzed Cure Berry, we're then able to get hit by a Thunder Wave. This is bad because we still have a 4 times weakness to rock, and now Aerodactyl gets to move first, and plus, it does more than half damage. Luckily, it misses its first Rock Slide and I can get to full HP thanks to Recover. But the next Rock Slide then hits for massive damage and I get fully paralyzed, ruining this entire run. On the next attempt, Rock Slide is able to take me down in 1 hit as well. Luckily on the next attempt, we don't get paralyzed because Dragonite has a 25% chance to miss Thunder Wave. And then Sacred Fire has a 50% chance to burn Aerodactyl, therefore allowing its Rock Slide to do significantly lower damage, taking us to Charizard, but its Hyper Beam is just not able to do very much damage, allowing us to move on to the last Dragonite. But that Dragonite's not going to be very powerful as we're able to take it down with 2 returns, making us the champion of the Pokemon League. After a short chat with Mary and Oak, we then move on to the Champions Room, where our Pokemon is then logged in and we get to move on to the next portion of the game. Post-game then starts with Professor Elm then calling us and telling us he needs to see us. He hands us the SS ticket and says we can then head over to Johto. The SS ticket allows us to go onto the SS Aqua, where we meet this old guy looking for his grandchild. Then we talk to this sailor who's looking for his friend. Then we head over to the vacant room with the sailor in it, we battle him, and then he gets back to work. We then walk past the first sailor and we arrive into the captain's quarters, where the little girl is then hanging out. We tell her that her grandfather is missing her and she takes us to his room. He gives us Metal Coat as a gift and we're allowed to head off the ship. We then talk to the Pokemon Superfan, who usually gives you a bicycle voucher. However, today he's going to give us a rare candy. I then make my way to the power plant, where I talk to the manager and he tells us about the missing part. I then head directly to the Cerulean Gym, where I run into this Rocket who tells me there's nothing to see here, followed by battling my way through the Nugget Bridge trainers to see Misty on a date and ruin it. Then back at the gym, I picked up the Ruin the Machine part that's in the water as I make my way towards Misty. Misty will most likely be one of the more challenging battles of the run, because we just don't have a move that's very effective against our Pokemon, and all of her Pokemon will have moves that are effective against me, especially if any of them use Rain Dance. But, as you can probably imagine, this is Gen 2, and in Gen 2, all of the Pokemon are underleveled, and therefore I can do massive damage, and with a neutrally effective move like Return, massive damage is all I really need to do because our attack stat is so incredibly high. But for some reason, Misty didn't even really use many water moves. She focused on stuff like Confuse Ray. Anyways, with that battle completed, we can then return the machine part where the manager gives us Zap Cannon, which we'll never use and never want to see again. Then we make our way over to Surge. As I previously mentioned in other videos, Surge's Pokemon are pretty defensively weak, and with a fire move, even Magneton's going to be very easy. So we're just going to use Return on basically all of his Pokemon. He doesn't even really get the chance to outspeed or use any of his evasion tactics because all of his Pokemon contain Double Team, which is actually quite annoying. But it doesn't really matter because none of them outspeed and therefore none of them are going to survive a single return, and we get our victory quite quickly. With the machine part turned in, we can then head over to Lavender Town, where this guy is going to give us the EXPN card, which is an attachment for the radio card that we obtained earlier in the game, so that way we can battle Snorlax using the Pokeflute channel. With Snorlax, we're just going to go ahead and catch it using a Master Ball. Afterwards, we're going to take the leftovers that Snorlax is holding and move it onto Ho-Oh. But from there, we can just make our way over to Brock, as nothing is going to be able to stop our path of destruction. At least nothing except for rock types. Rock types are going to resist both our fire and our normal moves, so we're going to be forced to use Shadow Ball for this entire battle. For the fossil Pokemon, it actually double resists my fire moves, so there's absolutely no chance I could possibly use Sacred Fire. But it's alright because Shadow Ball is going to be a very strong move. 80 power is going to be pretty darn effective, especially since our attack stat is so darn high. Plus, we've got a pretty decent level lead, which makes it so we're going to be doing even more damage. Plus, our leftovers is going to be able to offset the damage that Sandstorm is doing to us every single turn. But it does get a little bit scary as he does bring me down to orange at one point. However, it's not a big deal. We just get rid of Sunny Day here, move on to Rhyhorn, and Rhyhorn really can't do much to us, so we just use 2 Shadow Balls and we're going to get through this encounter without too much difficulty. However, if we were on the same level as him, we probably would have lost. From there, we can make our way south through Pallet Town and swim all the way to Cinnabar Island, or at least what used to be Cinnabar Island. We remind Blue that he's a gym leader and he needs to head back to his gym, as we then pick up the rare candy and move on towards Blaine, who's hiding out in a cave east of the island. He then starts off with his new non-Arcanine Cargo, which is obviously not very good, so it goes down to 2 Shadow Balls, followed by Magmar, which is obviously going to go down to a Return because it doesn't have a resistance to our other moves for once. Rapidash meets the same fate with Return, but it does hang on for just a little bit, allowing him to use a Max Potion, delaying the inevitable for just a little bit longer. However, it's not going to be enough as we do get ourselves a Volcano Badge and are able to move on to Janine. But as mentioned in every single Gen 2 video, Janine is probably the worst gym leader who's ever existed. She's not even stronger than Clair, which is located in Johto. However, I have a feeling they wanted her to be weaker than her father, Koga, who is in the Elite Four, who clearly does have Pokemon in the level 40s. I understand that she's not supposed to be stronger than her father, but she's like way later in the game. She should at least have Pokemon equal to her father's. And she's even missing the Muck, which means that the Muck that Koga uses in the Elite Four must be his own Muck. Anyways, we need to move on, and the next gym leader on the list is Erika. It's time to continue on with the domination of all of these Kanto gym leaders, starting with the Tangela, which obviously goes down to a Sacred Fire. But let's be honest, all of our Pokemon are going to go down to Sacred Fire. We're nearly 10 levels higher, and a Fire type move is going to be great, but the best Fire type move in the game that's not Fire Blast is obviously going to do even better. So I really hope that you enjoyed all the new shinies on our team, because we've never actually seen a Jumpluff or a Blossom in this run. It's a pity that after the power plant, there's really not much to do. So we're going to head east over to Saffron City, where we're going to fight Sabrina. But with Shadow Ball on our moveset, you probably know how this is going to go, and our level difference keeps getting higher and higher the more gym leaders we face, because their levels are not going up, but our level definitely is. So we're going to go ahead and take down the Alakazam here with a Shadow Ball, not even having a chance of being outsped. It wasn't even close. We were like 30 faster than it. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the last gym leader, which happens to be Blue, located in Viridian City. Now, they definitely wanted to make Blue a challenge, so he's actually 10 levels higher than the rest of the gym leaders. He's so strong, in fact, that he was able to survive a single Sacred Fire. Rock Ground type is not exactly our favorite type to go against, so we're going to have to rely on Shadow Ball here, which happens to be our strongest move type. However, I for some reason got real cocky and used Recover. I had no idea that it knew Rock Slide, so we're really lucky it used Sandstorm instead. Gyarados' defense is more special defensive, so a return here is going to do a massive amount of damage, even though you really think it wouldn't do it. Now, it sets up a Rain Dance, even though it really shouldn't have, because a Hydro Pump would have done massive damage, but instead he's going to move on to Alakazam, which is obviously going to go down to his Shadow Ball. Even though it's the strongest Alakazam in the game, it's still not going to be strong enough to survive a super effective move. Arcanine, well, Arcanine is kind of a disappointing Pokemon, honestly. It's great, it's defensive, it's okay, but it's just, like, not living up to the hype. Yeah, it goes down to return here, but like, it doesn't do much damage. Flamethrower is fine, Extreme Speed is fine, it's like really cool design, but it's just not ever been the strongest Pokemon on his team, you know? Anyways, Blue has been defeated, there's only one trainer left, we all know it's gonna be Red. But before we get there, we need to talk to Professor Oak, who's going to be able to get rid of the guard that's blocking Mount Silver. Then I'm going to pick up the last rare candy that I know is really easy to get, and we're going to go ahead and move on to Red. As I typically like to do, I like to go into the Red fight with just our current moveset to see how we'll do. We're obviously very underleveled, and we're probably not going to stand much of a chance, but Pikachu is not very defensive and we get through it pretty quickly. We take a massive Surf from Blastoise. Luckily it goes down in the second return. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like even if we do rare candy, we're going to be able to survive 2 Surfs, so at some point we're going to need to get really lucky on Blastoise. For some reason I decided not to use Shadow Ball on Espeon. Probably wasn't thinking straight, or I probably thought maybe I was going to reset and therefore I was going to have to change up my strategy. Luckily, I can just use a Recover and get myself out of a bad situation. Unfortunately, I do take a special defense drop and things are not looking very good. We are able to recover more HP than we're taking, however, it's only a matter of time before we get hit by another special drop. Luckily, the next return is able to take down Espeon, and we can move on to Snorlax. Luckily, I was able to get a burn with the first Sacred Fire, meaning that every single physical attack that Snorlax was going to use is going to do half damage, allowing me to actually use a Recover and get through Snorlax. However, there was a bit of luck involved, as I wasn't able to take it down in one hit, but luckily it did not use Rest, and I was able to move on to Charizard. Charizard, however, is not going to be able to do much damage to us. Neither Wing Attack or Flamethrower are going to do a lot of damage, meaning we can move on to Venusaur. However, we only have 88 HP, that's not going to be a whole lot. Venusaur still has a chance of taking us down. Luckily, we don't miss a Sacred Fire, but it goes for a Solar Beam and therefore allowing us to get the win. I gotta tell you, a first try victory is not what I expected with Red. Crazy lucky. And plus, it's not even like the double Aeroblast crit luck we had with Lugia. This was a combination of a lot of things. I mean, yeah, we had a special drop, so it wasn't the best, but we were able to persevere thanks to a lot of good scenarios that we put ourselves in, but mostly because Snorlax just didn't use Rest. Anyways, so we beat the game at 135 real time, 559 game time, at level 60 with 5 resets. But if you were paying attention, you would have noticed that I forgot to start the timer after the Azalea Gym. And I did the math, and we actually put the timer a whole minute and 20 seconds higher than our actual time was. So we need to cut 2 minutes off because we ended with a 20 seconds. So we actually finished the game at 1:33 real time. Anyways, with a time like that, it's going to be number 1 on our leaderboard as I keep getting better and better at the game. Once again, big thanks to all of my Patreon members. If you guys enjoyed this content, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I very much enjoyed talking to you guys, and I very much love to hear you guys' opinions, so please leave a comment. My next video that was voted on by the channel poll is going to be Tyranitar. If you really like this video, I definitely recommend checking out the Mew video in the top right hand corner of the screen. Thank you all for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week.